must constantly look at things in a different way.
The Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast was created by two physical therapists out of the desire to learn more about the different educational roles in physical therapy and healthcare, and how healthcare education works by talking with educational leaders and people with different perspectives within physical therapy and across interdisciplinary lines on how education can be improved to disrupt the status quo of healthcare education. This is our journey, and thanks for listening. Are you a third-year physical therapy student that excels on tests when you have study guides, checklists, and deadlines? With all of the information available about how to prepare for the NPTE, it's easy to get disorganized and not feel prepared going into the big day. NPTE Prep Success is an online course that provides PT students easy-to-use study guides and step-by-step guidance through the NPTE preparation. To learn more, visit kylericeprep.com. Thank you again all for your continued support, and now for the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. F. Scott Field, and I have two ladies who are fresh off of their discussion here at CSM on medical marijuana and what the buzz is all about. I have Dr. Suzanne Tinsley and Dr. Janine Hatch. Ladies, could you first tell us a little bit about your academic journey and how it led you to where you are today?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me. I am a practicing clinician for almost, 37 years. And so how my realm in academia, I was a clinician at an inpatient rehab. I graduated from a program supposedly with a specialization in adult rehab, but having graduated in 1986, I laugh now of what I was supposed to have been an expert or a specialization in what I knew then and what I know now.
Right.
And so I was working in a rehab, was going to be only a clinician, got approached by the physical therapy school in my city. Would I be willing to teach their neuro content, because I'd had some students come through that had liked what they got in terms of me as a clinical instructor. So I did that for a couple of years just as an adjunct faculty member and thought I really liked this. And so I took a faculty position there and thought, I'd always had an interest in neuroscience. And so sought out a way to gain my PhD. At my university, there was a process where I could go to school and teach at the same time. And so I really started out in neuroscience. And at that point, the only program or the only department that would let you go part-time was the pharmacology department. And so the anatomy and the biochemistry department wouldn't let you go part-time. And so I really started out in pharmacology for the neuroscience component. And, I think God has a plan.
Life led you that way because it was the only option. Huh?
Right. And so that's how, then I've now been on faculty for 30 something years and one of a very few physical therapists that has a PhD in pharmacology. So that's where, kind of my academic career has gone.
Awesome. Dr. Hatch, just tell us a little bit about your academic journey and how it led you to where you are today.
So my academic journey, I was one of those kids that couldn't wait to go to school. I think it started there. My mother tells me stories about when I was 5 years old. I used to wake up well before dawn to wait for the school bus to go past the house. It made my day. And I think it was always ingrained in me. But, I started out as a clinician and I always had this quest for learning. And I was a bachelor's degree, a trained physical therapist, but I wanted to get my master's degree. And then I wanted to get my doctoral degree when those options were available. And after I finished my degree training, I was invited by Mass General, where I got my master's and doctoral degree, to do some adjunct teaching. And that was the start of my journey. I had relocated to Connecticut. I was invited by Sacred Heart to come on board with them. I was there for 15 years. And in the meantime, through a variety of, colleagues, I partnered with Shenandoah University to be their associate director for their Transitional DPT program, which is beautiful because I can run that program and teach in that program from my home in Connecticut.
Nice.
And so that's kind of the journey I have. Still a clinician, keeping everything that I teach very relevant and everything that I, keeping on top of what's come trends like medical marijuana and
Yeah.
CBD in practice.
Yeah, so I'm super excited to talk about this stuff today because, again, I didn't know much about it. I've had some experiences with friends and family members and some patients that have used it, but it's something we definitely don't learn about in school, right? That's definitely not something that I've experienced in my schooling, and we definitely don't cover it in our curriculum currently. So this is a great opportunity to learn about what we need to learn and then how we need to teach it, I think. So Dr. Tinsley, if you wouldn't mind, would you just break up the difference between hemp versus marijuana versus CBD, just so we have a foundation to work off of?
Okay, hemp and marijuana are the plants that then contain certain levels of these molecules, CBD and THC. So hemp and marijuana are all part of the cannabis family. And to be considered hemp, you can only have up to 0.3% THC within that plant. Marijuana is a plant that has greater than 0.3% THC.
All right, and can you tell us a little bit about how THC works in the body versus how CBD works in the body? Because it seemed like they kind of have two different ways that they work, and it's kind of important, the difference, it seems.
Sure, just as in a simple component, there are two receptors in our body that THC binds to, or that are part of our endogenous cannabinoid system. And those receptors are CB1, cannabinoid 1, and cannabinoid 2. And so those receptors have been identified as the receptors that interact or that THC binds to with high affinity. And so the mechanisms or the dynamics of that molecule or medical marijuana, THC, is binding with these two receptors. CB receptor 1 is primarily in the central nervous system, spinal cord. CB2 is primarily in the periphery, that has to do with peripheral pain, immunosuppression, those types of things. Now, CBD, which is the other molecule that we see, CBD oil, CBD gummies, etc., is a molecule that is derived from the cannabis plant, both hemp and it is also in marijuana, that doesn't really have a great affinity for those two receptors themselves. So we don't get high binding of that molecule to those two receptors, but that molecule does seem to have effect in other pathways within our system, has seemed thought to have an effect on being a partial agonist to a serotonin receptor, have some effect on voltage gated ion channels, has some effect, we don't know really how, but some effect on the PPAR system and other things that are thought to mediate its effects of helping with anxiety, pain, inflammation.
Awesome. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Dr. Hatch, would you mind telling us a little bit about CBD claims and some of the popular uses then?
So CBD has claims that are very vast, and marketing claims that they sort of range from overall wellness to some dermatological conditions, even pet health. But what they're most widely used for are to manage pain and mood disorders such as anxiety and depression, as well as managing sleep disorders. There are also some indications that it might be useful in helping reduce the reliance on narcotics for pain management.
I mean, it all seems like there's some good there that could possibly happen for sure. But I feel like this is maybe where the education has to start. I think this is great because this is what we as therapists have to learn. And then we then need to learn how to teach for our patients. I feel like we do a lot of educating and teaching for our patients.
Right.
What would you say then is that conversation that has to be had with the patient? What would you say we have to, as therapists, what are we allowed to say? What can we do to help have the conversation when they come to us and ask, hey, I'm thinking about, possibly using CBD?
Well, it's important for our patients to know that CBD is a medication. It is not an herbal supplement. It is not a dietary supplement. It is a medication. And it has not been approved by the FDA. And that's because there hasn't been enough evidence to show CBD safety or its efficacy or how much we should be taking, how much our patients should be taking. There's no dosing regulations. And, CBD, you deliver it in a gummy or a pill or an oil, seems to have this interpretation that it's, harmless. It's just very innocent, a little gummy. But
the packaging is a little scary there.
It's a little misleading.
Yeah, kids see that and they think, oh, gummy bears,
And the problem is that it is also associated with some serious adverse effects. They have drug-drug interactions and drugs that a lot of our clients that we're seeing in rehab take on a regular basis. NSAIDs, steroids, anticoagulant medications are just some of those. And those drug-drug interactions are profound and other side effects. So they're not as innocent and benign as they think they are. These are medications and they have considerations, for use along with any other medications on the market.
Yeah, so I think the takeaway then is, hey, look, this is a medication, any way you want to look at it, and we need to be aware of that and then educate the patient as to some of the possible side effects and things they need to be aware of and what to look for.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. Dr. Tinsley, would you mind then telling us a little bit about the gummies or edibles versus the inhalation and some of the differences in levels and stuff that how it affects the body and so.
So we'll go with medical marijuana.
Okay.
Which is the primary compound is THC. So highly lipid soluble. And so based on the mode of delivery, there are several things we have to look at. One is bioavailability. How much are you going to absorb in the bloodstream? Because normally medical marijuana is meant to have a systemic effect. So we have to think about the mode of delivery in terms of bioavailability. How much of it are you actually going to absorb? Okay, so if you eat edibles, pills, if you use it through what we call our GI system, you eat or swallow, then you've got about a 6 to 10% bioavailability. If you smoke it or vape it, then it's a much greater bioavailability, the more you're going to absorb. And then there is also, when you smoke or vape, there are variations in what you're going to absorb and how long it's going to hang around based on whether you're a novel user or a long-time user. Novel users might absorb maybe 6, 10, 15% of the THC bioavailability, and then it's going to hang around maybe 8 to 15 hours, and then that's the half-life. Mm-hmm. Chronic users or long-time users, it's almost like your lungs get primed. Yeah. And if you are a long-time user, then you might absorb up to 35% bioavailability. And then the longer you use it, then the longer the half-life. So that half-life could be 24 to 36 hours. And so we talk about the half-life as the time it takes to cut the concentration in half. So if you are a chronic user and you vape or smoke on the weekends, if you were a novel user, all of that would be out of your system in about 3 to 5 days. If you're a long-time user, you smoke one weekend, then you look at 5 half-lives, that's 10 or 15 days before you finally get rid of all of it. So those are issues that we have to tease out, and that I think sometimes we have to explain to patients, I'm not going to tell you whether you use it or not, but did you know, okay, particularly I think of a patient that might be, what are the drivers that are certified to driving trucks?
Long haul
drivers. Okay, so you might be seeing a patient like that as a workers' comp case or a low back case. And he tells you, I occasionally smoke marijuana on the weekends, okay, to help with my pain or whatever. Okay, well, I'm, as a clinician in my state, I can't say, yes, I think that's a good thing. No, I don't think that's a good thing. But I could say, because I know this component about kinetics. Okay, how long have you been using that? Okay, did you know that, you being a chronic user, that you're not getting rid of it as fast as you
Right.
think you are.
It sticks around. And,
Right.
yeah.
And so, I want you to think about that. I would hate for you to have a drug test, the random drug test, you might think about that. So I think those are things that even though we're not necessarily prescribing or telling patient yes or no, that if we have a patient that is using it, then at least we educate them on some of the side effects and, or as Dr. Hatch said, some of the problems of where did you get it?
Right.
Was it a certified dispensary or was it not? And, or did you buy it online? And when you bought it online, did you see if did you look up to see if that product was deemed as, if it says it's this percentage, it is that percentage? And so, those are things that we have to think about.
Yeah.
So I hope that's kind of what you were saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Hatch, I have a question for you. You brought up a pretty good point about how the research is really kind of inconsistent and there's not a whole lot of it out there. And then I have kind of a follow-up for the both of you, but what is the research showing? What are we seeing out there? What's useful research that we should go to? What are some things we should maybe look at? And then we'll kind of maybe talk about some of the barriers to the research. That question will be open to both of you, but.
Well, the research for CBD products is largely focused on its three most popular uses, right? Pain, sleep disorders, and anxiety or mood disorders. And and the research is difficult to. We don't have a lot, like you said. There's not a lot of research, so we don't have a nice wealth of literature evidence to be looking at and analyzing for our use. And the literature is oftentimes not reproducible. So one study might come out with showing favorable results and another similar study will show different results or maybe less favorable results. It's just not been reproducible. And that is a dilemma because now there's not a sort of a collection, a body of information that says, so it overwhelmingly shows either favorable, efficacy or it doesn't. Because you're always going to find, pros and cons. You're always going to find research that shows, yes, it's a good idea or no, it's not a good idea. And the only way to interpret that is if you have a body of evidence that shows overwhelmingly in favor or not in favor, yes, we're going to have other dissonance. And we don't have that right now. And so a part of the reason why these studies are difficult to reproduce and they're difficult to interpret is that many times the subjects are taking these medications, they don't know the percentage of CBD. They don't know what kind of CBD compound they're taking. And they don't really have any idea of how much they're taking because there's no dosing guidelines. And so when asked, okay, so if you're a CBD user, did you get good results or not so good results of managing this ailment? Everybody's got a different story because everybody's taking a different product, and that variability in that methodology just really makes that study very difficult to interpret.
Right. So let's say somebody is interested in maybe getting into, medical marijuana studies or CBD studies. What do you guys think are some of the barriers that we're going to have to face in performing those studies? Obviously, state by state, it's going to be a problem, right?
It's a Schedule I drug.
Yeah.
And it's, you need lots of licensure and regulatory guidelines, and it's state by state, and it's also still got a stigma associated with it. And so,
And I think if you look at it from a regulatory standpoint, if you are a researcher and you want to study marijuana, then, let's say you're NIH funded or whatever, then you have to get the marijuana from the federally regulated or the state regulated growers. All right. And so that marijuana, we know how much THC compound is in it because that's where you have to get it from. But if we really want to study that compound, then we need to study what the consumer is using.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so then if you're in a state that has full legalization, then I'm a researcher and I'm studying the effects of marijuana or medical marijuana that has 12 to 15% THC, and I'm finding these things, yet this person is going out and buying it from a farm that is not federally regulated, and they have hybrid and spliced to where their product has 36%. And so you can't extrapolate what I found in my regulated research to that particular person because it's not all regulated.
Yeah.
So if it were totally FDA approved, which as Dr. Hatch says many times it's not, then it would be easier to do research that is reproducible and that we could extrapolate across populations because we're talking about the
The
same
same
thing.
thing.
Right. So we're not even comparing apples to apples
Exactly.
anymore. It's literally apples to oranges or apples to guavas or something
Right.
at this point. Who knows? Okay. Well, like I said, this was super informational. I think it's a good starting point for the conversation about what we need to know, either as physical therapy students or physical therapy teachers, professors, at least how we can have the conversation and start to think about what we can educate our patients on it at the very least, and know that this is a topic that exists and it's going to continue to exist. So it's a good starting point, I think. But do you guys have any final comments on like dangers or awarenesses that need to be put out there for just, general public information, things that we should be red flags to be aware of or notes to give to patients, takeaways?
Yes, especially with CBD products have been growing in popularity exponentially. And what I think consumers don't realize, it is a medication. It is a drug. It is not a dietary supplement.
Yeah.
Even though it's on the shelf of the healthcare store and, your local pharmacy, it's not FDA approved. We don't know about safety, don't know about efficacy. We don't know about dosing guidelines. And so they need to know that we just don't have enough information to know if this is a good decision at this point, and that it isn't going to cure what they are looking to address, and they shouldn't use this in lieu of other medical interventions, other medical protocols. There's still too much unknown about it, and they have to understand there's risks associated with it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I would say, just to tag along with Dr. Hatch, that we have those patients that are stubborn, okay? And that we tell them what she just said, and they said, well, I'm going to use it anyway.
Right.
And so again,
You can lead the horse to
right.
water.
and thinking about the whole client and thinking about, do no harm, all right? Then I would take it, just addition to what Dr. Hatch said, is that, okay, if you're telling me you're going to use it, then I would suggest that you research where you're going to get it from. And if you want to find out, what products have been vetted to the standpoint of knowing, online products that actually have the amount of CBD that they say they have, then there are places where you can go to do that. So at least do some research to make sure that whatever you're buying is what it says it is, so that then you as a consumer can make an informed decision if you're going to use it. I would first say with what Dr. Hatch said, but there are those people that say, well, I'm going to do it. Okay, well, if you're going to do it, I don't want you to go get a product that is either not have what it has or has more and we have an adverse effect. So, make sure that you at least, there are sites and there are places that there are 3 regulatory agencies that you can look online, and that they list the products that are pretty good at being what they say they are.
Yeah, and we can put those links in the show notes
Right.
so people can reach those.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good resource, I think, to have to, buyer beware. But if you are going to use it, please at least be educated
Know what you're
and
using,
informed.
know what you're using,
Right.
and know where it's grown,
Yeah.
and know that the product has been fully analyzed to show you exactly what the dosage is, what the content is, what the purity is, so that you at least know that it's a safer product to use.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for coming on the show and educating the audience about all things marijuana, medical marijuana related. We've got one final question for you that we ask everybody. If you could change one aspect of higher education, whether it be DPT or otherwise, what aspect would you change and how would you change it?
Well, for me, and this is a personal observation, the admission process be somewhat standardized or be based on things that are not arbitrary. Particularly in those programs that take a limited number of students and how highly competitive it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like for us as a a profession, and particularly an academic profession, to do the research, to find out what it is or what are the qualities that we're looking for, and use those that have objective findings. Because having sat on an admission committee, and we are getting these students coming through, and I'm making decisions on really what could be the difference in their life. I mean, I am making a life-changing decision, and I'm not sure that I'm using the appropriate tools or the appropriate information to make that decision. And that bothers me. And the older I get, the more it bothers me, is that here I see these young kids and that they're coming through and, we're using GPA. Well, what is that? That's not comparing apples to apples. Right. Okay. And then, the GRE, well, that's not comparing apples to apples, particularly with what we know about standardized tests. So as an educational unit, I would like for us to see what it is that we should use at admission criteria and use that rather than the things that are so arbitrary.
Yeah, I love that. It's a great response. Dr. Hatch.
I would like to see that for physical therapy schools, particularly, when we're talking about adult learners working on professional training, I want to see us really embrace change in our instructional delivery, our learning methodology. I mean, COVID showed us a lot and really forced our hand into rethinking how we do what we do as academicians. And I think we should not try to put that genie back in the bottle. We learned so much about how to be effective in our use of the technology for online, instructional delivery, and at the same time, how to be effective then with our face-to-face time with those students. It speaks to online instructional delivery has some hiccups. It has some limitations, but the strengths are overwhelming. I mean, students can have the opportunity to keep reviewing those lectures over and over again in their own time to help with their learning, instead of trying to spend that time splitting their attention between hearing the instructor, writing down, notes. It's there for them, just like a textbook. Is one major strength. And then the instructors can use their face-to-face time to go in that deeper learning,
add to it,
higher in Bloom's taxonomy. Let's apply what you learned, what I just taught you, those fundamental tools. Now here's an opportunity for us to apply, for us to discuss, for us to explore. We don't get that level of Bloom's taxonomy in a face-to-face lecture. Yeah. So I think that's what I'd love to see, is just, let's not put that genie back in the bottle. Let's keep moving forward.
Awesome. Well, ladies, again, I can't thank you enough for your time. Where can people reach out to you if they want to follow up with questions or just want to see what you guys are up to?
You can put our emails on those links too.
Okay.
That would be wonderful. We'd love to hear from you all.
And I as a physical therapist that is a pharmacologist, I have taught this curriculum or this content for many universities and in their entry level. And then I work with Dr. Hatch with, her transitional program. And I'm very adamant about it. So I am happy to share content, to share, case studies or things. And so, just reach out. I'd be happy to share my materials to, it's an area that our students need to know. We need to be able to make decisions and to understand how drugs, not only marijuana and CBD, but other drugs interact and affect our patient outcomes. And I'm very adamant about making sure that we teach students that content. So I'd be happy to share what I have if somebody's interested.
Awesome. Great. Thank you so much, ladies. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
Access to healthcare is one of the largest issues facing both providers and patients, as millions of people worldwide lack timely and affordable access to healthcare. Anywhere Healthcare, a telehealth platform, is a simple, low-cost option for providers and patients that eliminates the barriers to access to all kinds of healthcare. To find out more, check out anywhere.healthcare, which is available on our show notes. And if you use the code HET in all caps when you email to sign up, you'll save 25% off the total cost. Thank you for attending class today, and we hope that you learned something and gained value from the content.
If you'd like to schedule office hours with us, feel free to add us on Twitter at HET Podcast, on Instagram, HET Podcast, on Facebook, the Healthcare Education Transformation Podcast, and the homepage, healthcareeducationtransformationpodcast.com.
And for those of you following along in the syllabus, extra credit can be obtained by liking us, sharing us, and leaving a review.
Let's continue our journey up Mount Educational Success as lifelong learners.